series of crimes in a small farming community left people reeling in shock and fear. As the hunt for the suspects expanded, they turned to the FBI for help. They traveled over 1,000 miles to find the deadly perpetrators before more innocent victims crossed their path.
In June of 1997, a crime wave swept Iowa like a tornado. It left a trail of robbery, kidnapping, and murder in its wake. And then it moved on. No one knew where. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI committed its resources to tracking down the suspects. By the time they were identified, they already had a 12-hour lead. The pursuit would take the FBI across 6 states in their efforts to catch the killers.
June 11th, 1997, south central Iowa. The farming region, rich with crops and livestock, began to stir as dawn became morning. Most farmhands had arrived hours earlier to begin their chores. But one who never missed a shift without calling had failed to show that day. Her boss, a nearby farmer, became worried when he called and got no answer. Since she lived alone, he went to check on her. He noticed her pickup truck wasn't there, and the front door was ajar. Inside, he found the lifeless body of his farmhand, Barbara Garber.
Barbara.
Mahaska County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest responded to the 911 alert.
In 20 years of law enforcement, I've been involved with about 5 or 6 homicides. So it's not something that happens a whole lot in Oskaloosa, Iowa, or Mahaska County. When we went into the living room, we observed Barb Garber's body. She was sitting upright, fully clothed in a chair. She was leaning over to the left side, and there was blood coming from her head.
The sheriff called specialists from the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation to process the scene. The middle-aged woman had been shot 4 times at close range while she sat in the chair. Technicians recovered .22 caliber shell casings close to the victim. At her feet, they found her half-eaten breakfast. The absence of defensive wounds on the body indicated the farmhand had put up no struggle, according to Iowa Special Agent Michael Barrier.
The house did not appear to have any forced entry. It looked like someone had just entered the house, either been let in or had gotten in without having to break in. The residence had a lived-in look but was not ransacked. And there was nothing obviously taken from the residence other than her vehicle was missing from the driveway.
Green pickup truck.
The farmer described the victim's vehicle as a late-model dark green pickup truck.
And that was her personal truck?
Detectives issued a be on the lookout for the missing truck to all law enforcement in the area.
Vehicle, a station wagon.
As you were coming down this road?
Yeah, coming along this road here.
Investigators spoke to her closest neighbor, who lived a quarter mile down the road. She had noticed something earlier that day when she was on her way to work in the pre-dawn hours.
All the way down there.
She saw an unfamiliar blue hatchback or station wagon backing out of Mrs. Garber's driveway. but she didn't see who was inside, and she didn't get the license
They were
plate.
following me.
This vehicle was described as a older, not in very good shape, station wagon type vehicle, blue in color. The vehicle was not a vehicle that had been seen at the Garber residence before and was not really associated with the Garber residence, and so we felt that it may be, and probably was, a suspect vehicle.
As police were talking to the neighbor, an alert came across the police radio.
What you got? Okay, I'll be en route.
A bank 5 miles away in the hamlet of Gibson had just been robbed. Deputies from 2 counties responded. Because deposits are insured by the federal government, the FBI was called in.
Yes.
The closest field office was 77 miles away in Cedar Rapids.
2 males, armed. Okay. All right, we'll be heading right there. Larry, we got a bank robbery in Gibson. Okay. All right.
FBI Special Agent Scott French was assigned the
2
case.
males. Who are they armed with? All right, bye.
The small savings bank in Gibson had just opened for business for the first time that day to the town's population of 70.
Down south here. Right there.
It has one paved road to the community of Gibson. The rest of the area is surrounded by farmland with a few gravel roads leading away from the community.
Omaha 991.
It would take Agent French over an hour to get there. Sheriff's deputies arrived first to secure the crime scene and take witness statements.
Okay.
Bank employees told investigators that the robbery had occurred at about 10 a.m.
Let's go back to his.
Right.
They had no customers at the time, and there was no guard on duty. Only a teller and the manager were inside when the robbery took place.
Knee up against the counter and.
2 armed robbers wearing dark ski masks, gloves, and brown coveralls burst into the bank. One held a shotgun while the other carried a handgun.
Pick that money up, come on.
The robbers scooped stacks of cash and banknotes into plastic trash bags.
Come on, hurry up! Let's go! No, up against the wall, now! Go!
They had gotten away with $65,000 in cash.
Moving!
Though they wore masks, bank employees believed both men were white males.
The Gibson Savings Bank did not have any security system. That is, no video cameras, no film to have recorded the robbery. This makes it difficult for investigators to have some evidence other than witness statements.
Investigators found only one person who had seen anything, a 10-year-old girl.
If you had to guess, what kind of car would you say it is?
She told agents that she'd been riding her bike across the street when the robbery occurred. 2 men in ski masks holding bags had jumped out of a gray car and had run into the bank. She rode away before the men came out. The girl was either too young or too scared to get the license plate. Police put out an all-points bulletin alerting units to be on the lookout for a gray sedan as a possible getaway vehicle.
I felt the robbers in this particular case were from the immediate area. First of all, the Gibson Bank is a very isolated location. Second of all, both individuals were wearing coveralls, which are somewhat indigenous to the working people in these communities.
Car 32. Car 32. Uniform 2. 10-4. I got it.
The deputy on his way to the robbery scene headed for likely routes the bandits would have used to escape.
Central, I'm going to check this out. We have a car matching the description.
2.5 miles from the bank, he noticed a gray sedan, apparently abandoned in the middle of a farm field. No one was in sight. He checked the car and radioed in the license plate number. It was registered to a teenager by the name of Island Schultz, who lived nearby.
He thought it was extremely unusual that this vehicle would be sitting where it was. And knowing that they were only just a couple of miles away, he drove to their house.
Iowa communities are tight-knit, and the officer happened to know the Schultz family. At the teenager's home, he got no response. The deputy found the front door unlocked.
Island?
Inside, he discovered 18-year-old Island Schultz lying on the floor, shot to death. He radioed for assistance. Mahaska County Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest felt strongly that this second homicide was likely related to both the first murder and the bank heist.
We're relatively sure in our own minds that these were all connected. They were in a 5-mile radius of each other. And again, that's just not something you see a lot of in rural Iowa, where you would have 2 bodies and a bank robbery all within a matter of 2 hours.
The recent high school graduate had been shot twice in the head from close range. An audio cassette and 2 .22 caliber shell casings, the same caliber found at the first murder scene, were recovered close to her body. Like the earlier homicide, investigators found no indication of forced entry and no defensive wounds on the young girl. Iowa Special Agent Michael Barrier discovered another important connection to the first murder victim, Barb Garber.
A neighborhood canvass in the area of the Schultz residence gave us information that a green pickup truck, newer, in good shape, was seen parked in the Schultz driveway at about 9:30 a.m. that morning. That's interesting to us because Barb Garber's pickup is a newer, dark green Dodge pickup truck. And so we believe that after her truck was stolen from her residence, that it ended up at the Schultz residence. And that tied the 2 homicides together.
Both bodies were sent to the county medical examiner for autopsy. Analysis of the bullets confirmed what investigators had suspected. Each victim had been killed with the same weapon, a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The FBI and local investigators assembled a command center in the Mahaska County Sheriff's Office. They set up a hotline and contacted the media with a description of the farmhand's late-model dark green pickup truck.
We occupied a large debriefing room, which acted as a command post. We began to collate leads that were coming in from all parts of the community. There was also significant media attention at this point, which increased the volume of phone calls that were coming in.
Deputies chased down dozens of leads. One was from a teenager who had seen a green truck that fit the description of the farmhand's pickup. He was in the town of Oskaloosa in the late morning when he noticed the truck drive past with 2 men inside. The witness didn't see their faces and he didn't get the license plate. It wasn't much to go on since that particular truck was so common in the area.
We received dozens upon dozens of sightings, most of which turned out to be absolutely nothing. It was just a green 1997 pickup. And everybody that was driving one at some point in time that day in the Mahaska County area was stopped.
Everyone except the driver of the murder victim's truck. Investigators fanned out to search the various small towns in Mahaska County for more promising witnesses. They found one who said he noticed something at around 10:30 or 11 on the morning of the crime spree. He saw a dark green pickup truck near the town of Oskaloosa. The witness identified the driver as a local man whom he'd never seen in that truck before. He claimed there was a passenger inside, but the truck pulled away before he could see who it was.
The individual who reported it recognized the driver of that truck as being Jamie McMahon, a person that he knew, and knew well enough to have recognized him and was positive that it was Jamie McMahon. He also said that there was a second individual in the truck, but he could not get a close enough look to tell whether it was even a man or a woman, just that there was a second person in the truck. Hey guys, what I want to do is, Don, I want you to take background on Jamie.
At the end of the first day, investigators now had the name and face of a possible suspect in the 2 killings and bank robbery. 22-year-old local Jamie McMahon. Agents and detectives hoped they could catch up with him and his unidentified accomplice before any more lives were lost. On June 12, 1997, the day after 2 Iowa residents were killed and a bank was robbed, the FBI and local authorities had the name of a possible suspect, 22-year-old Jamie McMahon. McMahon was last seen driving a green pickup that fit the description of the missing vehicle owned by one of the murdered women. Investigators believe that an unidentified passenger traveling with him may be an accomplice. Special Agent Michael Barrier of the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation learned that Jamie McMahon's last known address was at his parents' home in Oskaloosa, Iowa. His parents were concerned to hear from Agent Barrier because they hadn't seen their son since the crimes had occurred.
When we spoke to friends and family about Jamie McMahon, we found that he had been a good kid, hard worker, but that in the past few months prior to these crimes, his personality had changed somewhat, that he began to lose weight, that he had stopped working, and that it just appeared that he was having problems.
You mind if I ask
Investigators arrived at McMahon's home to search the house and find out more from his parents.
This won't take long for you to provide us some help.
Over the past several weeks, McMahon had been spending a lot of time with his 18-year-old stepbrother, Christopher Kaufman. Kaufman lived close by, but the two had different sets of friends and normally didn't see each other much. Lately, they'd been inseparable. Now, both were missing.
These are good.
Because the bank had been robbed by 2 individuals, and because the witness had seen McMahon driving a truck with a second individual, we just had to assume that Chris Kaufman was the second person with Jamie McMahon.
Detectives interviewed McMahon's friends who remembered seeing him with Christopher Kaufman late on the night before the crimes, driving an old blue station wagon. One friend had lent McMahon the car for the past few months, since the suspect couldn't afford one, according to Mahaska County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest.
This vehicle was a blue station wagon, which would appear to be a hatchback type vehicle if you just drove past the back of it. This would also tie in with the vehicle that the neighbors seen in Barb Garber's driveway earlier that morning.
Investigators searched the car, but found no evidence that physically connected McMahon or Kaufman to Barbara Garber's murder.
Any unusual behavior?
McMahon's friends mentioned that he had always wanted a dark green pickup like the victims, but the sticker price was out of his range.
Jamie had an infatuation with this particular type of vehicle. Earlier that year, he had one on order that fit the same as what Barb Garber's was and did not have the money to pay for it, so he canceled the order.
His friends added that the day before the murder, McMahon had stopped by with Kaufman to borrow something else.
Careful with it.
A .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun that he claimed he was going to use to shoot stray cats. The same type of gun was used in both murders.
Card.
Investigators asked his friends to call immediately if the suspect contacted them for any reason. Authorities learned from several other friends that the suspected murderer had recently been abusing the drug methamphetamine. FBI Special Agent Scott French was concerned about McMahon's mental state, since the illegal drug is an addictive stimulant.
Abusers of methamphetamine suffer a variety of side effects. One of which is they can be awake for several days. Second is they have loss of appetite. But of a greater concern to law enforcement is they have significantly clouded judgment. They become increasingly paranoid, and they may be easily agitated.
A widespread manhunt was launched for the stepbrothers in the dark green pickup truck that was still missing.
5:30, the neighborhood canvas revealed that a small blue car was seen at the Garber residence.
Agents and police also notified additional law enforcement agencies and media outlets throughout the Midwest. Warrants for murder and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution were issued for McMahon and Kaufman.
Initially, we felt that they had left the state, and we could only speculate as to where. Most of the investigators there felt very strongly that they were probably headed for Mexico.
Investigators revisited the homes of the pair's friends and family, figuring they would try to contact them.
We're going to put a recording device into the phone.
McMahon's ex-girlfriend gave the FBI permission to install a phone tap and recorder.
Okay. Figure out where he's at. And what's
If
going on.
McMahon called,
Okay.
agents would be ready to trace his location. As the manhunt for McMahon and Kaufman continued, a call came into the task force office. Two sets of local parents reported that their teenage daughters were missing. The high school girls, 16 and 17, had not been home since the previous evening. They were best friends and were always together.
Especially not
With two killers on the loose, the parents feared for the girls' lives. Investigators discovered that McMahon and Kaufman had been partying with several girls at a motel in Oskaloosa the night before the crime spree.
Okay, thanks.
At the motel, a clerk told investigators the girls had stayed overnight and were still in the room on the morning of the crimes.
Yeah, those are the girls. Those are the girls, yeah. Those are the ones.
The employee saw McMahon and Kaufman with a green truck later on that same day. She said the two girls left with the stepbrothers.
Yeah.
Investigators issued another nationwide bulletin that the fugitives McMahon and Kaufman were last seen in Iowa traveling with two teenage girls.
We were concerned for the safety of the girls. I believed at the time that if Jamie McMahon was willing to kill someone he knew, that the girls may be in danger.
Investigators responded to a promising tip that came into the hotline. McMahon and Kaufman had been spotted at a trailer several miles away from their family home. Investigators had no way of knowing if they were still armed, high on methamphetamine, or if the teenage girls were still with them.
Not wanting to take any chances and not knowing their mental state, we had the FBI SWAT team come in. Basically, we surrounded the cabin and came in from several different directions.
Heavily armed agents hoped for the best, but were prepared for the worst. Officers yelled for McMahon and Kaufman to come out. There was no reply. The police team stormed in, ready to use deadly force. In June of 1997, the FBI and Iowa investigators stormed a trailer in a remote field on the second day of a nationwide manhunt for 22-year-old Jamie McMahon and his 18-year-old stepbrother, Chris Kaufman. The pair were suspected in 2 murders and robbing $65,000 from a bank. 2 missing teenage girls were believed to be with them.
the back here.
Investigators found no trace of the fugitives or the girls. Sightings of the stepbrothers in the stolen green pickup were reported from as far south as Texas to as far north as Minnesota. With $65,000 in cash and a 12-hour lead, Iowa Special Agent Michael Beria realized the pair could be anywhere by now.
We were unable to really come up with any place that they may go. We had information that they might have gone to Minnesota. We also had information that they may have friends or relatives in Florida. But we didn't really have any solid direction of travel where they went.
After 7 days of searching, the FBI got the call they'd been hoping for.
Yeah, they're looking all over the place for you.
Agents were ready with a phone tap when Jamie McMahon called his ex-girlfriend. During the call, McMahon asked if authorities had any idea who killed Mrs. Garber and Eileen Schultz.
He was fishing for information. He was trying to see what we knew and whether we even knew that they were suspects in the case. And she just told him, you know, what did you do and why are they looking for you? And he became aware quite quickly that he was a suspect and that we did know that they were involved. And he hung up.
The agent called his supervisor at the Mahaska County Command Center. FBI Special Agent Scott French learned McMahon had been on the phone long enough to trace his call.
After we received the phone call from McMahon, I began the process of trying to track down the number from where he called. At some point, we reached a snag with a phone company outside the area, wherein they could not determine or provide the number until the following day.
Agents learned that the suspected killer had called from a hotel in Kissimmee, Florida. The employee recognized photos of the two fugitives and confirmed the two teenage girls were with them.
Are they in this hotel? Are they registered here? Are they in the hotel at this time? Please check. No, they checked out.
But they had all just left.
When did they leave?
The phone company's delay had given McMahon and Kaufman just enough time to stay ahead of law enforcement.
McMahon and Kaufman are gone. We missed them.
So they know we're looking for him now.
They know we're looking for them.
Good.
Agents were concerned that McMahon and Kaufman would be more difficult to find now, since they knew the FBI were on their trail.
All right, well, thanks, and I'll get back on this.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Though authorities had missed McMahon and Kaufman in Florida, the two teenage girls who had been traveling with the fugitives returned home safely to their parents.
Parents, take a seat, get some coffee.
Investigators questioned the girls about the time they spent with McMahon and Kaufman. The teenagers confirmed that they had stayed with the young men at the Oskaloosa Motel on the night prior to the crimes. The next morning, McMahon and Kaufman came by in a green pickup with a lot of cash. McMahon, the eldest of the group at 22, offered them a free trip to Florida. The impressionable teenage girls agreed to go with the stepbrothers and didn't ask a lot of questions.
The girls told us that they weren't aware that there'd been a homicide, and they weren't really aware that there'd been a bank robbery as such, but they were aware that something had happened to allow McMahon and Kaufman to have so much money.
The girls told investigators that on their way out of town, they stopped by the Des Moines River. One of the stepbrothers threw a duffel bag into the water, but he never told them what was inside. After that, the four of them drove south toward Florida.
For the first week of this trip with McMahon and Kaufman, the girls treated it like it was a vacation. They were having a good time. They were eating out. They were going to amusement parks.
One of their first stops was in Branson, Missouri. There, the four entertained themselves on carnival rides. The girls said they took photos along the way.
They had with them a couple of Instamatic cameras, and we took those cameras and had the film developed, and we had photographs of McMahon and Kaufman, and one picture in particular is of Chris Kaufman sitting in Barb Garber's pickup truck.
After their trip to Disney World, the girls said that McMahon and Kaufman finally confessed to them about the murders and the bank robbery. Kaufman had dyed his hair blonde to disguise himself. High on methamphetamine, the armed men also told the girls they wouldn't mind killing them as well. The girls were frightened and told the fugitives they wanted to return home.
All right, look, here.
McMahon gave them money for a taxi and train fare
Should be
back
enough here
to
to get y'all
Iowa.
back home.
They told investigators they had no idea where the stepbrothers were headed.
Well, they didn't say where they were going. They just gave us money and we left.
Investigators concluded the girls were not involved since they remained at the Oskaloosa Motel when the crimes had occurred. They released the teenagers into their parents' custody without filing charges. On the Des Moines River, an off-duty Iowa trooper happened to come across a bag in the water. He opened it to find a pair of black ski masks and brown coveralls. The officer also found a wallet with a driver's license. He contacted police and gave them the evidence. The wallet and driver's license belonged to the murdered Island Schultz. The clothing matched what the robbers were wearing when they made off with $65,000 in cash from an Iowa bank. Jamie McMahon and Christopher Kaufman remained the prime suspects, and they were still out there, armed and strung out. On June 30th, 1997, 19 days after the search for McMahon and Kaufman began, a call came into the Escambia County Sheriff's Department in Florida. A motorist in Pensacola wanted to talk to police.
Everybody involved in this that you can, okay?
He told them he was driving on a nearby highway when he noticed a green pickup. The night before, he had seen a story about the manhunt for McMahon and Kaufman on television. The truck seemed to fit the description of the fugitive's vehicle. The motorist pulled alongside to get a closer look. He thought the driver looked exactly like the man featured on the show. The truck also had Iowa tags. The motorist pulled off and phoned police.
South, east, and west of the area.
The Escambia County Sheriff's Department realized the motorist's description of the truck matched the one Iowa authorities were looking for.
Compass and compass out there.
Iowa authorities wanted to be sure this wasn't just another false lead. It seemed promising, since the suspected murderers were last seen in Florida. They confirmed the license number and sent photos of the stepbrothers to the sheriffs in Pensacola.
That's the same guy I'm thinking of.
Iowa investigators alerted them to use caution, since the fugitive pair were considered armed and dangerous. An urgent be on the lookout was issued for the green truck in the Pensacola area. Deputies searched local roads, shopping centers, and motel parking lots for any sign of the fugitives or the stolen green pickup truck. In the parking lot of a local motel, two officers spotted a green pickup truck. Motel residents usually park close to their room entrance, but this vehicle was obscured near the back behind a fence. Its Iowa license plate and description checked out. It was the murder victim's stolen truck from Iowa. Authorities had no time to lose if they hoped to bring in the fugitives before they eluded them once again. At a Pensacola, Florida motel, authorities had finally located the stolen pickup truck driven by Jamie McMahon and Christopher Kaufman. Stepbrothers suspected of 2 murders and a bank robbery in Iowa. Escambia County deputies needed to confirm if the armed fugitives were staying there.
I didn't know if you see these gentlemen today, people, man.
Yes.
The motel clerk recognized the photos of McMahon and Kaufman, but she added that there was a 3rd man in their room. She gave deputies the room number.
Possibly a hostage situation.
Police told her the motel had to be evacuated.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, I'll go with you.
Fearing that the stepbrothers had possibly taken a hostage, deputies called in a hostage negotiating team.
We know they've killed 2 already.
Escambia County Sheriff Sergeant Jerry Cox was in charge.
We want to establish a command post in this area. That's where we're going.
We knew they were armed. We knew that they were murder suspects. We knew they were bank robbers. They were seriously violent criminal individuals. So we got the call out. Our SWAT team and crisis negotiators got the call out, and we responded to the motel.
The motel was evacuated. The hostage negotiating team set up an emergency center nearby. SWAT teams took up positions near McMahon and Kaufman's room. Snipers set up on a nearby roof. No one knew the situation with the 3rd man or his relationship with the stepbrothers. They had no way of knowing if they were all still inside. The negotiator secured the line and attempted to get them on the phone.
Okay, we got the line.
From the man's tone of voice, the negotiator believed he was likely a hostage.
When I made contact with the room, the first individual that I talked to was the hostage himself. He gave me a false name, and I began to try to talk to him a little bit, knowing that was not the correct name, of course, and try to find out what his situation was, what his physical condition was, and what the situation was in the room.
The man said he had just met the fugitives hitchhiking and stayed with them to party for a while. The stepbrothers had been awake for almost 4 days, high on meth, and now they were finally crashing.
There's no way. They'll shoot.
The man had since become aware they were murder suspects and that they were still armed.
He was absolutely frightened out of his mind. He did not know what to do, and he knew that they were willing to take life. They had made statements to him that they would not be taken alive, and therefore he was afraid to make any moves because of what they might do to him.
Bobby?
The negotiator tried to convince him to leave the room, that the rescue team would be at the door when he emerged. While the man considered what to do, McMahon woke up.
All night. Well, yeah, one of them's getting up. But they're, it's cops, man. You guys gotta let me out of here.
One of my major concerns was the fact that they were known drug users and had been partying for a number of days. When people are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, when it comes to negotiations, one of the things you have to be aware of is how those chemicals can alter a person's personality and alter their reactions. They might be extremely aggressive.
Due to their 3-week drug binge, it became clear to the negotiator that the fugitives were not thinking clearly, if at all.
Talking to the cops for? Calm down, man. Whoa, calm down. Here.
His first concern was to get the 3rd man out safely without more bloodshed. Authorities were all too aware that the situation could turn violent quickly.
Paramount in my mind was the fact that if they killed 2 already, and both those murders, based on my information, were cold-blooded, calculated murders with no thought given whatsoever to the consequences, that they could easily do that again.
Hold on. Shoot everybody.
Calm down. Just sit down.
Calm down, man. Hold on. No, man. Put that away. Put that away, man.
Who is this?
Chill. Calm down, man. Just hold on.
Sharpshooters stood at the ready. The negotiator tried to convince them to let the man out of the room before someone else was killed.
Shouldn't have done that, man.
Man, what do you want? He's not us.
Just no. I'm out. No way, man.
Just gonna walk out?
There's no way.
All right, fine. You don't mean nothing crap to us.
Let the hostage go.
Man, Chris, let him go, man.
After 2 hours, the armed men finally allowed him to leave unharmed.
Yeah, put your hands on top of your head. Come towards me. Come towards me. Come towards me.
SWAT members spirited the hostage out of the line of fire to where the negotiators continued to work. The hostage said he met the fugitives in New Orleans and had been with them for several days. He said they had a lot of drugs and a lot of cash in the room.
Somebody a couple days.
They only had 1 handgun as far as he knew.
I guess.
With 2 armed fugitives still barricaded in the motel room, a peaceful resolution did not seem likely. In June of 1997, hostage negotiators and a SWAT team surrounded a Pensacola, Florida motel where 2 armed fugitives wanted for 2 murders and a bank heist in Iowa remained barricaded inside their room, strung out on drugs. Escambia County Sheriff Sergeant Jerry Cox was the lead negotiator.
It's the most difficult segment of the negotiations for me, was to try to overcome the emotional state that they were in as a result of their drug use, their prolonged activity of being awake for so long, and to try to direct them in a peaceful resolution.
He spoke to 18-year-old Christopher Kaufman for some time.
This is Chris. We're gonna kill everybody.
The young fugitive was aware that he was surrounded by police. Sergeant Cox tried to convince him to do the sensible thing and come out unarmed.
But one of the things I was able to learn from Kaufman was that he was tired, that he was just too physically and mentally exhausted to be making an awful lot of decisions.
Worn out, Kaufman passed the phone to his 22-year-old stepbrother, Jamie McMahon.
Hello? What?
The negotiator noticed that McMahon seemed more lucid, more mature than his younger brother. He used it as a hook to separate the two.
So I told him, I said, it's obvious to me that you're the one who's running the show in there. I need you to take charge and do something for me. And he said, what is that? And I said, well, what I need you to do is I need you to take care of your brother. I need you to get him out of there.
Look, just go.
The strategy worked.
Man, just go. I started this. Let me finish.
Movement, red one, white male.
Chris, man, I just want you to go.
McMahon didn't want his brother to suffer
No,
whatever
look at me, man. You
consequences
just gotta
McMahon
go.
was going to face by staying in the room.
Go.
SWAT members secured Christopher Kaufman. Now, only his stepbrother remained. McMahon teetered between indecision and despair. He knew his options were limited. The 22-year-old began to weigh life in prison versus suicide.
I heard what sounded to me like a weapon being charged. It was an automatic pistol that he had in there, so it sounded like somebody had slid the slide back and ejected a shell into the chamber, arming the weapon for firing. Gave me some concern. I passed that information on to our commanders and our SWAT team.
McMahon's judgment was clouded.
You there?
He didn't want to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
No, man.
Confused and desperate, he looked to the negotiator for guidance.
And the thing that seemed to work the most was constantly reminding him that as long as he was alive, he had some hope. He had a chance. Once he was dead, there was no chance. and that in Iowa there was no death penalty. He had an awful lot of years ahead of him to figure this out.
McMahon relented to the negotiators' insight. 4 hours after it had begun, the last fugitive walked out of the room, unarmed as instructed. The negotiator was able to defuse the situation without death or injury. Agents secured and searched the motel room. They recovered $29,000 in cash of the $65,000 that was stolen. They also found the .22 semi-automatic handgun. On every table rested empty beer bottles, marijuana, and powdered methamphetamine. Ballistics tests later confirmed that .22 was the weapon used to kill the 2 women in Iowa. Authorities questioned the pair separately.
I understand from your brother that you committed both of the murders.
No. One of them.
Kaufman told investigators it was his stepbrother's idea to rob the bank. To pull off the heist, they needed a car. McMahon already had his eye on the first victim's pickup truck, the truck he initially wanted to use as the getaway vehicle.
I think I may have left it at a different friend's house. You mind if I use your phone real quick?
Mrs. Garber knew McMahon and allowed the brothers into her house.
Man, just put the phone right back down, please. Yeah, please.
Look, I got money in the house. You don't
Shut
need
up,
to,
man.
you don't
Just sit
need to
down right there.
listen.
Just sit down.
Just
Shut
sit
up.
down!
You don't
Once
need to-
inside,
Just
Kaufman
do it.
claimed his stepbrother egged him on to kill her.
Just do it. All right, do it.
He wanted Mrs. Garber dead so she wouldn't report the vehicle missing. Kaufman said he shot Barbara Garber twice, then again to make sure she was dead. Since McMahon loved her truck so much, he wanted to keep it and steal a different vehicle to use in the robbery. McMahon decided to try another friend of his, Eileen Schultz.
Hey. You remember my brother Chris, right? Hey, we're really out of gas, so can we borrow some money?
Sure, no problem. Come on in. We got some.
Like Mrs. Garber, their second victim let McMahon in along with Kaufman.
Little road
The
trip.
pair claimed they needed money for gas.
Yeah, I think I
She
have
lent them
some.
$5.
Is that good
That's
enough
fine.
now?
For now. Yeah.
As she bent over to put a music tape on,
Hey, I got a
Kaufman
pretty
told
cool
investigators
Take a look.
his stepbrother shot her in the back of the head. To make sure she was dead, McMahon shot her again between the eyes. The stepbrothers took Schultz's car keys and wallet. Over the next 3 weeks, the pair spent $36,000 on hotels, prostitutes, and drugs before they were apprehended in Pensacola, Florida. Though Iowa had no death penalty, Jamie McMahon, 22, and Christopher Kaufman, 18, faced the federal death penalty for 2 carjackings resulting in death. They faced another federal charge for bank robbery. To avoid a death sentence, the stepbrothers pled guilty to all federal and state charges. Their convictions left many unanswered questions for the people of Iowa and Mahaska County Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest.
These 2 guys were as common as any 2 boys next door. I can't explain why they would go to this extent to get a vehicle and to go on vacation or just to impress a couple of girls. It's just crazy. You'd never guess that they would be the 2 type of individuals to do that, knowing their parents, knowing their backgrounds. I mean, it just didn't make sense.
Jamie McMahon serves the rest of his life in Leavenworth, Kansas. Christopher Kaufman serves his time in solitary confinement in the tough Supermax federal prison in Florence, Colorado. In the late 80s, Florida's cocaine imports were among the highest in the nation. Regional territories were enforced with intimidation and murder. One dealer bowed to no one, not even law enforcement. Desperate to stop the violence, authorities turned to the FBI for help.
A suspected drug dealer would stop at nothing to keep local and federal authorities from building a case against him. When his organization started targeting the government itself, federal agencies went on high alert. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. He was a desperate man, driven to desperate measures. Bringing him down would take the combined efforts of the DEA, the ATF, and the FBI.
Fort Myers Beach, Florida, July 18, 1987. It was a Saturday night in a Gulf Coast beach town with a thriving nightlife and a booming drug trade. Away from the tourists, many local residents spent the weekend at private parties. For some, that included cocaine. At one party, several men waited for their friend to return with more drugs. He'd been gone for about a half an hour when they heard what sounded like gunshots at around 10 p.m. The owner of the car, whose vehicle was used for the drug run, saw that it was now parked out front. Inside, he found his friend shot to death. The Lee County Sheriff's Department responded to the scene. A forensic technician found only one identifiable fingerprint on the car. It belonged to the vehicle's owner. Lying close to the driver's door were 7 empty .22 caliber shell casings. Investigators determined the victim had been shot at close range. An autopsy would reveal 8 bullet wounds in his upper body and traces of cocaine in his bloodstream. The owner of the car said the dead man was his friend, 29-year-old Craig Karen. Reluctantly, he told homicide detectives that the victim had left earlier to buy cocaine. The victim's girlfriend suggested police should question her boyfriend's cocaine dealer.
Has he been bound before?
He owed the dealer money for drugs. The dealer had a reputation for violence. Lee County homicide detective Tom Continos learned the dealer's name was Jeff Saganek.
Jeff is a young kid from Fort Myers Beach who had established himself as what I thought to be a mid-level drug dealer on the beach. Through talking to Craig's associates, I learned that Craig owed Jeff a large amount of money. And the reputation was that you better pay your bills with Jeff or he's going to send someone to collect it.
The next day, an unexpected visitor appeared at the Lee County Sheriff's Department. It was the alleged cocaine dealer himself, 23-year-old Jeff Saganek. He asked to see the detective investigating the previous night's killing. He wanted to give a statement. The reputed dealer, with a history of arrests, heard he might be a suspect and wanted to set the record straight. On the night of the murder, Jeff Saganek claimed that he and his girlfriend were at a restaurant for a late dinner. He said that he had talked to the victim in the parking lot just before the couple sat down to eat. After a few minutes, the man left. The reputed dealer said he and his girlfriend were at the restaurant from about 9:45 until 11 p.m. And he had more to offer than his word. Jeff Saganek handed the detective his restaurant receipt. The waitress who served them confirmed the story.
Yeah, I'll talk to her. Maybe we'll slide by the restaurant and see.
It appeared he had an airtight alibi. But to the seasoned detective, it seemed Jeff Saganek was trying too hard to cover his tracks.
I had investigated enough homicides to see all different types of suspects and how they react and the reasons why they commit murder. For this young kid to come in, as well organized as he was, with an alibi, with witnesses, with receipts, he became my #1 suspect.
On a tip, the detective questioned a member of a local rock band who was also known to deal cocaine. He admitted that the victim sometimes bought drugs from him directly, which made Jeff Saganek, allegedly the largest dealer on the beach, angry over the lost sales. At about 11:15 on the night of the murder, Jeff Saganek came to the lounge where he was playing. According to the performer, Jeff Saganek boasted that he had just had the victim wasted and that it would teach the people of Fort Myers Beach a lesson. The musician's story was one of many over the next several months that confirmed what police already suspected. But even in the underworld of Fort Myers Beach, rumors and innuendo were not evidence of murder.
Everything that I got was hearsay. No one would really give me sworn testimony that says, I saw this or I saw that, or I know this and I know that. It was all he said, she said type of intelligence information, which is maybe okay for drug cases, but not with murder investigations. You need sworn testimony of people who actually saw something happen.
Then, in the summer of 1988, over a year after the murder, the detective finally got a break. A young woman came forward, claiming to have witnessed the killing. She had not spoken up sooner because she was addicted to drugs and was protecting her former supplier, Jeff Saganek.
Craig Karen. He had it hidden.
Now she was clean and wanted to tell detectives what she had seen on the night of July 18th, 1987.
But when he told me to go.
She was on her way to the cocaine party that evening when she witnessed the shooting. The gunman was her former boyfriend, a man who worked for Jeff Saganek. But the detective would be unable to speak to her boyfriend directly. Just a few months after the murder, her boyfriend had committed suicide. She told police that she also had direct knowledge about Jeff Saganek and his organization. The woman said Jeff and his right-hand man operated out of a local pizza parlor that Saganek owned. The dealer stored his drugs and money at several different locations and moved between them to avoid detection. Few people knew where he actually lived. Jeff Saganek had many people on his payroll, but she knew only a handful. Her former boyfriend was one of them. Hired by Jeff Saganek to do whatever the dealer needed done. She and Jeff had also had an arrangement. In exchange for storing drugs and guns at her apartment, Jeff had paid her rent. Unable to corroborate her story with other testimony or physical evidence, the detective could not charge Jeff Saganek with the murder.
I followed up on those leads, and I was not able to substantiate any of the information that she gave me at that point. So without the trigger man, without a gun, without eyewitness testimony, I couldn't get to Jeff. I couldn't get to Jeff. I had no physical evidence, no testimonial evidence that enabled me to bring charges against Jeff.
The homicide detective looked to the Lee County Narcotics Unit for help. Detectives began surveillance on Jeff Saganic's pizza parlor, hoping to identify someone they could turn against the dealer. The place was a popular spot. It would take time for officers to discern the drug traffickers from the legitimate customers. To complicate matters, Jeff Saganic changed his name legally to Jeff Matthews, presumably to sever ties to his past crimes.
Jeff was the type of person where he wanted to be a clean-cut businessman. Jeff even went to the point of changing his name from Jeff Saganic to Jeff Matthews to try and help him with his reputation.
Over several weeks, investigators noted which people frequented Jeff Matthews' place without picking up any food. Investigators spotted one man who visited often. A license plate check revealed his name was Stephen Franken. Detectives speculated that Franken might be their connection to Jeff Matthews. Investigators called DEA Special Agent Dennis Bolam, who was already familiar with Stephen Franken. Agents believed Franken was a low-level cocaine dealer who procured his supply from Jeff Matthews, but they had no proof. To link the two men, Agent Bolam hoped to use an informant close to Franken.
I received some information from a cooperating source that Mr. Franken was distributing cocaine out of his house on Hibiscus Street in Fort Myers Beach, and that he was distributing to quite a few people down at the Fort Myers Beach area.
Their informant, recently arrested for possession, was one of Stephen Franken's biggest customers. For his cooperation in controlled drug buys from Franken, the informant would receive probation. If the purchases were successful, agents would be able to arrest Franken, then press him for direct testimony about Jeff Matthews and his organization.
Stephen Franken was important to the investigation. He had quite a bit of knowledge as far as drug trafficking that was taking place down at Fort Myers Beach, and with Jeffrey Matthews' participation in this drug trafficking.
The informant returned with cocaine. After several more buys, DEA agents finally had what they needed to make an arrest. On August 25, 1988, agents secured a felony arrest warrant for Stephen Franken for the sale and distribution of a controlled substance. Once Franken was in custody, agents searched his house. Inside, they found prepackaged cocaine, scales, and cash.
All right, we got
In exchange for a shorter sentence, Franken agreed to cooperate with agents. He admitted that murder suspect Jeff Matthews was his cocaine supplier and consented to say so in front of the grand jury. Franken was released on bond until then. As investigators continued to hunt for evidence in their case against Matthews, deputies in nearby Collier County, Florida, responded to a crime scene. On October 2nd, 1988, a surveyor had discovered fully clothed, skeletonized human remains in a rural dump site. It appeared the body had been there for the past several weeks. Though there was no wallet or other ID, detectives did notice a paper bracelet on the victim's wrist, similar to those used by hospitals and nightclubs. Investigators gathered dental records from local families who had recently reported their loved ones as missing. They hoped one of them would match the unknown victims. The dental records, along with the body, were sent to the medical examiner for comparison. He first determined that the victim was a white male in his 20s, killed execution style with 5 .38 caliber bullets to the head. From the body's wrist, the ME removed the paper bracelet. He confirmed it was an admission ban from a nightclub in Fort Myers Beach. Dental records from a missing 22-year-old man last seen leaving the club confirmed that the murder victim was Thomas Sellers. A Collier County Sheriff's detective visited Sellers' father to give him the bad news.
Questions in reference to that. Has he been doing any illegal activities or hanging around anybody lately that...
The father told the detective that his son had a cocaine problem and believed the young man owed his dealer, Jeff Matthews, $1,000.
So tell me, what are you looking for?
It was also rumored that his son was last seen leaving the club with a man reputed to be a hitman for the dealer. But once again, investigators were unable to find evidence to corroborate the rumors.
Aware of him. Do you have any pictures of your son?
Agents and detectives' only direct witness to Matthews' operation was Stephen Franken, a low-level dealer arrested months earlier. They hoped his grand jury testimony would be enough to arrest a cocaine supplier suspected of ordering 2 executions. On January 27, 1990, as the DEA and Lee County, Florida sheriffs continued to pursue suspected cocaine dealer and murderer Jeff Matthews, detectives received a call about another possible homicide. At around midnight, a man was unpacking boxes in his new home when he heard the sound of a car squealing towards his house. The vehicle didn't stop until it reached his backyard. Inside, the driver was dead. Lee County Detective Tom Continos was one of the first to arrive at the home in St. Carlos Park.
Initially, I was told it was a motor vehicle accident. There was a dead body in the car. And the closer I looked, the more I realized that he didn't die from a car accident. He died from a bunch of bullet holes.
The driver's license found on the victim identified the dead man as 22-year-old Stephen Franken, the primary witness scheduled to testify against drug kingpin Jeff Matthews at a grand jury hearing just 2 days away. It seemed Matthews was aware that without Franken's testimony, investigators wouldn't have enough evidence to bring an indictment against the cocaine dealer, suspected in 2 killings and now a 3rd. According to DEA Special Agent Dennis Boland,
I think the timing of the murder was because of the timing of the grand jury, the information we received as far as Jeffrey Matthews being involved in other shootings and murders at Fort Myers Beach, and that Stephen Franken had some valuable information as far as Jeffrey Matthews' drug operation.
But now the grand jury would never learn what Franken knew about Matthews. The federal witness was likely dead before he crashed. Detectives decided to search the surrounding area to determine where the shooting had taken place.
Something happened before the guy hit the house, or else he wouldn't have driven through the house. So I walked down the dirt road about several hundred yards, and I found what looked like some attempt at a roadblock.
Large and small branches covered the road, strewn by what must have been a vehicle. To the left side of the site, detectives found several .22 caliber shell casings, the same caliber as the bullets later removed from Stephen Franken's body. Footprints, as well as tire impressions from a separate vehicle, were discovered close by in the loose dirt. Technicians made plaster casts for later comparison should a vehicle or suspect be located. From their placement in Franken's wounds, officers determined that the shooter had fired at the driver's side of the car.
My immediate thoughts were that someone had constructed this roadblock to slow a car down, slow the car down enough where someone can jump out of some brushy area that's along both sides of the road and shoot the person driving that car.
The gunman must have known when Franken left work and the route he traveled home. The victim probably stopped briefly when he saw debris in the road, just long enough for the shooter to take accurate aim. Clinging to life for a few more moments, he likely accelerated down the road and into the house. Though suspected murderer and drug dealer Jeff Matthews was believed responsible, investigators were once again left with no direct evidence tying Matthews to the crime. The fact that Stephen Franken had been a federal witness enabled authorities to broaden the investigation to include the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI. Together, they needed to develop a strategy to snare Jeff Matthews and put an end to the violence. Retired Special Agent Guy Notley was part of the team.
The FBI immediately started working with the Lee County Sheriff's Office and the Drug Enforcement Administration. There was nothing done without telling the other agency involved that what was going on. The FBI did have a lot of manpower that they could put on this matter. They did have tremendous ability for the technical aspect of the investigation.
They knew Matthews was still operating in the area, but the dealer was well insulated. The only way to get to him was through his drug operation and employees. But after the informant Franken was murdered, finding someone else to cooperate would be no easy task.
What made it so difficult was that we didn't have a lot of people come forward and voluntarily supply information on Jeffrey Matthews. Most of the people knew that he was capable of committing murders, and they were intimidated by him.
Agents turned to a man behind bars whom they believed had been an insider in Matthews' organization. Serving a 10-year sentence on concealed weapons charges, the Fort Myers Beach, Florida man was reputed to be one of Matthews' former hitmen. He agreed to tell what he knew about the dealer's drug operation in exchange for a shortened sentence. Just before his arrest, the alleged hitman admitted that Matthews had ordered him to surveil Stephen Franken to learn the man's schedule. With that information, Matthews would be able to silence Franken before he could testify against him. The convict denied knowing who actually pulled the trigger, since he was behind bars before the murder took place. He did tell investigators about another unsolved homicide he claimed that Matthews had committed. He said that one night at the pizza parlor, a contractor was repairing the tiles on the kitchen floor after the restaurant closed.
Try this with the sounds.
The hitman had brought over a new silencer for Matthews' gun.
No one's gonna hear anything. No one hear anything. That thing, see the weight. It's a heavy gun. Yeah. Look at that. Yeah, how's that? Nice target. Scratch.
He claimed the drug lord killed the contractor just to test the silencer. Agents hoped to get Matthews to corroborate the hitman's stories. The convict agreed to call Matthews to set up a recorded meeting. He asked Matthews to come by the prison to drop off some new music tapes. Matthews agreed.
Hi. Hi.
Agents would be ready to record the conversation on audio and video, hoping Matthews would incriminate himself.
We received approvals from the U.S. Attorney's Office as well as the jail to install these recorders. Then after we installed everything, he never did show up. Jeffrey Matthews is very elusive, surveillance conscious. He insulated himself pretty well. Even his closest friends didn't know where he was residing at.
Matthews' last suspected victim may have known. But because he was silenced, the alleged murderer remained free and was becoming more desperate. By early 1990, the FBI, DEA, and Florida authorities continued to pursue suspected drug lord and murderer Jeff Matthews. Since 1988, he had been implicated in 4 executions in the Fort Myers Beach area. For Lee County homicide detective Tom Continos and dozens of agents, a lack of hard evidence and verifiable witness statements kept Jeff Matthews just out of reach.
2 years have gone by and I still couldn't get my hands around Jeff Matthews. There was nothing there for me to follow up on. It was dead end after dead end after dead end. All the time I knew Jeff was my #1 suspect, and he was getting stronger and stronger and bolder on his criminal activities on the beach. And it was very frustrating.
On February 12, 1990, a judge agreed that investigators had enough circumstantial evidence against Matthews to search the dealer's pizza place, the likely headquarters for his operation. They served the warrant after hours to avoid endangering customers.
Upstairs, down here.
From the restaurant, investigators seized documents, phone records, and bank and credit card statements. They also confiscated Matthews' Trans Am. The tire treads were compared to impressions found at one of the murder scenes. The results were negative. Upstairs from the pizza parlor, investigators searched an apartment where Matthews was rumored to sometimes stay with his girlfriend. The couple was not there, nor did the searchers find any cocaine. But they did recover silver tip .357 cartridges.
45 caliber cartridges. 22 calibers.
Cash, additional phone records, and most importantly, .22 caliber bullets. The same caliber used in at least 3 of the 4 executions. They were sent to the crime lab to be compared with the spent .22 caliber rounds retrieved from the victims. Tests of the bullets' metallurgic composition did not reveal any matches. It was one more dead end in a grueling case. Though there was no direct evidence linking the alleged drug dealer to the murders, DEA Special Agent Dennis Bolam and his team believed they had enough to indict Jeff Matthews and several associates as part of a continuing criminal enterprise.
We had concerns at that point that by leaving him out on the street, he could commit additional murders. So we felt we had sufficient evidence at that point, and that's the reason why we went and got the indictments to go pick him up.
But Matthews was nowhere to be found. Friends and associates claimed that he had left Fort Myers for parts unknown. His girlfriend, also named in the indictment, agreed to cooperate with investigators to help locate the fugitive. Through a tapped phone line, she made contact with Matthews on his cell.
Hello? Hey, it's me. Hey.
The suspected murderer refused to say where he was.
Don't worry about where I am.
It's kind of hard to get in touch with my
She told him she was worried about the indictments.
If I find out who ratted on us, I'm going to kill him.
Matthews vowed that he would find out who was talking to authorities and kill them, plain and simple.
Where are you?
Yeah.
He hung up seconds later. The next day, a confidential informant gave Lee County homicide detectives a promising tip.
investigating a
They learned that Matthews had rented a car with a borrowed credit card on the night Stephen Franken was murdered.
Here's a picture. Can you tell us a little bit about the case?
An evidence technician compared the tire treads from the rental car to a plaster cast of the tracks collected at the scene of the ambush. They matched. It was the first hard evidence linking Matthews to one of the 4 murders. Unfortunately, it didn't prove that Matthews had driven the rental car to the crime scene, nor that he had pulled the trigger.
We were trying to gather as much information about Matthews as we could. We weren't even successful in finding out where this guy lived. We heard he lived in this big house. We heard he lived in that big house. He drove this car. He drove that car. But he was never there. We were never able to pin him down to where he lived. We only knew that he drove one car, and that's a black Trans Am. He was like, he was everywhere but nowhere.
Then on the night of March 16, 1990, Lee County detectives responded to a call from the home of a Fort Myers Beach fire inspector. A pipe bomb was thrown into his driveway. Filled with .38 caliber bullets, the explosion sent ammunition and shrapnel ripping through the inspector's car and house. It also damaged a storage shed and a neighboring home. No one was injured. The inspector said he had no idea who might be responsible. Detectives asked him for a list of businesses that had failed any recent fire inspections.
You got any problems with anybody?
One name stood out.
Jeff Matthews.
I responded to that scene, learned that this fire inspector conducted a fire inspection of Matthews's restaurant and did not give him a very good write-up as far as the fire conditions of the restaurant. Once I heard that, I said, this is Jeff sending this guy a message.
But if it was Matthews, he had left no trace. All police had to go on was the spotty testimony of a neighbor. The neighbor had heard tires squeal just before the explosion. When he looked outside, he saw a white hatchback race away. It had been too dark to see the license plate. If Matthews had been involved, Detective Continos pondered his change in tactics.
I remember thinking that was a significant change in Jeff's operation. Before, he was targeting other drug dealers. Now he's targeting government officials, being that he was a Fort Myers Beach fire inspector. That is something different that Jeff was doing.
The detective returned home well after midnight. He tried to unwind, hoping to get some sleep. At about 2 a.m., the sound of an explosion sent him rushing to the window.
That sounded like a transformer blowing up, a car backfiring, fireworks. I mean, there's a number of things that happen in my neighborhood that sound could possibly occur. Phone rings 2 or 3 minutes later. It's one of my associates who's on the DEA task force, says, Tom, the DEA building just got blown up.
The Fort Myers DEA office was moments away from the detective's house.
I'm the first one on the scene, and I saw the entire DEA building engulfed in flames that are hundreds of feet high. I mean, it was an incredible sight for me.
Investigators immediately suspected fugitive Jeff Matthews. It was the first bombing of a DEA office in U.S. history. 30 firefighters battled the blaze for almost an hour. Dozens of agents, U.S. Marshals, and deputies from 6 neighboring counties were also called into help. FBI Special Agent Guy Notley was among them.
When I arrived on the morning of the bombing, on March 17th, DEA agents informed me that the suspect in this matter was most likely an individual that they indicted 2 days before, Jeffrey Matthews.
If this was the work of Jeff Matthews, the cocaine dealer's violence had escalated to horrific proportions. When law enforcement becomes the target, no one is safe. And Matthews was still on the run. On March 17, 1990, 2 days after a federal grand jury indicted suspected drug lord and murderer Jeff Matthews, the DEA office in Fort Myers Beach, Florida was firebombed. Agents suspected Matthews was responsible, but he was still at large. The FBI and Lee County Detective Tom Continos believed the fugitive was also the prime suspect in another bombing that occurred just hours earlier.
We realized that in all likelihood, that the pipe bomb at the fire inspector's house was a diversionary tactic to pull law enforcement resources away from the patrolling area of the DEA building in order for Matthews to firebomb the DEA office.
By dawn, all that remained of the building was a burned-out shell. Investigators now began the task of assessing what was left, how it happened, and where the evidence was buried, hoping to identify the perpetrator. FBI Special Agent Guy Notley called in specialists from headquarters.
We brought in bomb technicians from our laboratory in Washington, D.C., as well as some FBI agents from the Tampa division to conduct an investigation. The investigation consisted of going through all the debris that was left at the site, basically by taking it through a shovel and sifting through till we found out what incendiary device that's used.
They determined that the fire was caused by a pipe bomb taped to 2 5-gallon gas cans and tossed through a window. It landed in the office of DEA agent Dennis Bolam. He believed the aim was no coincidence.
My feeling is Jeffrey Matthews was trying to destroy the evidence in the case, and I had the case files on the Jeffrey Matthews case in a file cabinet right near the window, and amazingly the fire and the explosion went right past it, and everything was intact as far as tape recordings and notes and so forth.
Because of the early hour, no one was injured, but damage was estimated at $4 million. Through scattered witness accounts, investigators pieced together a possible scenario for the bombing. No one knew how many people were involved. But neighbors heard only one car and one door open, then close. Investigators figured those responsible stopped close to the building for a quick hit and run. The bombing had a profound effect on area law enforcement. Agents struggled to deal with the physical reality of the destruction and their emotional reactions.
I was shocked, and then I was angry, and then I was more determined to get him at that point than anything. It's changed my life because I had to have 24-hour guard on my house, as well as the other agents and the prosecutor in the case. I had a wife and 2 small children that I had to worry about, and they had to be protected. And I knew that he was still running around out there, and that there's a possibility that he could do this again.
FBI lab examiners inspected the remnants of the bomb. Nails used as shrapnel were packed into a metal pipe 5 inches in diameter with a unique threading and surrounded with gunpowder. Duct tape held the pipe between 2 5-gallon tanks of gasoline that helped to spread the fire when the bomb went off.
Pretty much familiar with the murders.
100 DEA agents joined the team, and the 4-person FBI office grew to more than 50. Investigators began tracking down where the bomb materials may have been purchased. Teams of agents canvassed every hardware store and gas station for miles around.
Yeah,
The pipe used in the bomb had a unique threading. Agents found the store clerk who had sold this unusual item just days before the explosion.
Yep, that's
The clerk identified Matthews as the customer who had purchased it. Agents asked dozens of gas station employees if they remembered anyone purchasing gas in 2 5-gallon tanks during the past week or so. One remembered that a man fitting Matthews' description had done so recently. The evidence was mounting against the bomber, but agents still had no idea where he was. They interviewed his friends and associates to determine with whom he'd been in contact.
You know Jeffrey, don't you? And how do you know Jeffrey?
One told them that he had written to her, begging her not to believe what she read about him in the newspapers. But she had believed the articles and agreed to have her phone monitored so agents might trace a call from Matthews.
Well, that would be great. You'd be willing to do that? Think you could help us?
He was elusive. We never knew where he would be at any given time. He was always on the move. So we utilized a trap and trace. We knew that he utilized a cell phone, and we were trying to zero in exactly where he was.
With a signed affidavit, agents went to the company that handled Matthews' wireless account. If there was a hit on a cell tower from his phone, authorities would be alerted. They discovered he was still in Florida.
We had even aerial surveillance set up in the Orlando area where we found out where his cell phone was coming from to see if when he made a call that we could get people there quickly in an attempt to apprehend him.
But agents were unable to trace Matthews' calls closer than a 2-mile radius. Then investigators received the tip they were hoping for. They raced to a Fort Myers storage facility where the manager had recognized Matthews from the media. The fugitive was presently unloading a truck there. Agents hoped they could get there before the suspected murderer and bomber escaped again. In the spring of 1990, FBI agents raced to arrest 26-year-old fugitive Jeff Matthews, suspected in 4 murders and the bombing of the Fort Myers, Florida DEA building. A team of agents responded to a call from a storage facility manager who had seen the wanted man on his property.
Turn around! Face the opposite direction. Keep your hands up.
Agents approached the suspect, ready to use deadly force. They removed his wallet to check his ID.
Okay.
The man was not Jeff Matthews. After 2 years of pursuit, Lee County, Florida Detective Tom Continos was disappointed, but not discouraged.
I just knew that at some point we were going to get him. He was too active, he was too violent. What concerned me was at what cost before we got him. We just didn't know how long it was going to take and how many dead people it was going to take for us to get there. That was my concern.
Is this where you kept the stuff? Yes, sir, it is. All right, thank you.
Investigators received a tip from a realtor who claimed to have rented a house to Jeff Matthews before he was a known fugitive. They found common items, including duct tape and hardware store bags that might be linked to the bombing. Then they came across something that seemed clearly connected to Matthews' crimes. As DEA Special Agent Dennis Bolam recalls,
there was a note, and the note was addressed to the Lee County Sheriff's Department. I don't know the exact verbiage that was used in it, but it's something to the effect that catch me if you can.
Catching me because you won't.
Investigators sharpened their resolve to find him before anyone else was killed.
Jeffrey.
On April 9th, 1990, Matthews called his friend's tapped phone. Agents were prepared to strike if the woman could keep him on the line.
All right, yeah, I can.
This time he was calling from a payphone, according to FBI Special Agent Guy Notley.
We were able to determine that he was in the Orlando area. Agents were sent to different quadrants where they could be within 10 or 15 minutes of different pay phones that we thought maybe Matthews was using.
Field agents waited for the word as precious seconds ticked by. The woman asked him where he was, but Matthews was anxious to hang up. Despite his best efforts, they got the trace. Agents set out to apprehend him before he vanished again.
Our people were able to put a location on where the phone call was coming from. Agents were only about 5 or 10, 15 minutes away. They arrived at the scene. He was still talking when the agents arrived.
FBI, you're under arrest. Show us your hands. Show us your hands.
After almost 3 years of pursuit, investigators arrested Jeff Matthews without incident. To avoid the death penalty, Jeff Matthews pled guilty to supervising a continuing criminal enterprise, committing homicide to further that enterprise, cocaine trafficking, and bombing a federal building. On July 31st, 1990, Matthews asked to speak to DEA and FBI agents. He said they needed to move on something right away or more innocent people would surely be killed. The convicted killer had a storage unit in Gainesville, Florida, loaded with explosives in a booby-trapped van. Agents immediately notified the bomb squad.
I had concerns that he may be trying to set us up. Maybe have his last hurrah before he went away to jail, and that we might be sending some agents into a real dangerous situation.
As Matthews had described, agents found a red van parked inside a storage unit rigged to explode. A bomb squad defused the devices and secured the area. With the booby trap rendered harmless, investigators quickly removed the dozen pipe bombs they found in the van. They also recovered an AR-15, a MAC-10, a MAC-11, and a .22 caliber handgun with a silencer.
There was rubber masks, Halloween masks. There was police raid jackets. There was additional bombs, bomb-making equipment, manuals on how to make bombs, how to make booby traps, fuses and equipment to make bombs, including pieces of piping and timers and so forth.
Matthews also told investigators where they could find the body of the contractor murdered in his pizza parlor more than 2 years earlier, though Matthews claimed that his hitman had done the actual killing. Matthews said he and the hitman had carried the body in a freezer to the house Jeff was renting and buried the victim nearby. It was the same house where investigators had found Matthews' taunting note. They located both the freezer and the body, just where the killer said they would be. For this crime, Matthews pled guilty as an accessory.
Drug dealers just don't start off a business by killing people. And most of them don't kill people. But Jeff was a very violent, organized person. And that made him dangerous. And that made him even harder to catch.
On October 1st, 1990, 26-year-old Jeff Matthews was sentenced to 100 years in prison without the possibility of parole. He will never again be free to terrorize the people of Fort Myers Beach, Florida.